was. It's funny. Mr. Should I call you Mr.? All right, let's have some fun, everybody. Can I get a sense of the room? How many of us here are entrepreneurs? Hands up if you're an entrepreneur. You run your own business. Yeah, great. I've prepared my session for you guys. Thank you, Harrison. I've prepared my session for you guys. I've prepared a whole host of thoughts. Here's what success for me looks like over the next few minutes that we are together. First, that I might leave you as much offended as I do inspired. So I'm hoping that I'm going to say something that you find offensive, say something that challenges your thinking, say something that pushes you perhaps a little bit beyond where you're operating at now. Second, I like to think of myself as a how guy. I've been in this business for way too long to know that you can really impress people by telling them what to do, but the most important thing is to tell people how to do it. And so I've prepared for yourselves here sufficient material of the thing to do when we leave this room. Is that okay? Let me tell you why this is important. Because you will leave this room. You'll go back into the real world. You'll go back into running your own lives, your own businesses, your side hustles, the job that you've got. And then typically what happens, this has been my experience, is we leave the room feeling inspired until life hits us. And when life hits us, we default. We default back to our old behaviors, our old habits, our old patterns of thought. And so for me, what is important is that we leave this room with a what to do. This means if you don't have a pen and paper, make sure that you've got one, just so you can take some notes, particularly towards the middle part of what I've prepared for us here today. And then third is I have been now for a while. I was hoping my brother Katuka would have helped me with this, but he's failing at his job. I've been now for a while hunting for a Ugandan wife. And we've prepared a whole host of material. We've got my CV ready, but for whatever reason, I just can't ever seem to get one good enough. They either don't know or praise the Lord, or something is always wrong in Uganda somewhere. I'm just saying. Although somebody did say to me, you must be careful because women in Uganda are very... Anyway, let's move on. So... Let's move on. Guys, show me my deck. Let's get started. This is a whole host of stuff that my team has prepared on about me. You guys know who I am. You know what I've done. You know that the good Lord has been very gracious to me. I must tell you, it's a true story, Anthony. This year, 2024, 22 years in this business, and without question, I think I've had my best year yet. Panther problem. All of you here, I imagine, are familiar with Pink Panther, but I'll tell you a little bit about the history of Pink Panther in a moment. First, if any of you have heard me speak before, you know that I love defaulting to numbers. I'm a numbers guy. I'm a finance person. So I tend to see the world in either statistics or graphs. But brace yourself. I've got, I think, about 7 or 8 graphs and about 12 slides that have got some statistics. Which brings me to the creatives in the room. Where are the creatives here? If you're in the creative arts, you do fashion, you social media, where are the journalists? Where are the journalists in the room? Okay, I need all of you to do me a favor. Take your right hand and put it over your left chest. If you're a lady, squeeze a little bit. I'm kidding. And I need you to repeat after me. Repeat the following. I swear I will not panic. Thank you. That's generally what happens with people. The minute they see a number or a graph, they just go into a tiz. What I thought I'd do first, Anthony, is I'd get us started talking about some trends of entrepreneurship in the world. And what we've done here is we looked at the Entrepreneurial Spirit Index by generation. What this does is it references the potency might not be the correct word. It references the ubiquity of the entrepreneurial spirit by different generations. I need to issue a few disclaimers here. First, when we talk about these generations, Gen Zs, Millennials, Gen Ys, baby boomers, etc., this is an awfully American concept. A lot of the data is based on the Americas. However, as the world is malleoing itself into kind of a singularity of thought, driven in part by those rectangular devices that light up when you touch them, that some of you are pointing at me now, called phones, we have become a universe of one. In other words, our cultures are transmitted more and more because we're all consuming the same social media, except, of course, if you're in Uganda, because some of it is banned. I know there's security here, so I'll say no more. View is on the high. For the millennials in the room, the largest proportion again, in fact, it's equal between very high and high. For the Gen X's, it begins to drop, concentrates itself on that very high. And then for the baby boomers, you notice that it's almost predominant on the very high. Why is this important? Because when all of us here think about entrepreneurs, we tend to have an idea of who the entrepreneur is. It's a young person who's dropped out of school and started some sort of technology company or some sort of influencer online. But actually the literature tells us that entrepreneurship as a spirit is high across generations. This should be liberating, especially to those of us in the room who are older. In other words, it's not too late to start. That urge that you're feeling to get into business is necessary and natural. In fact, the latest literature now released says that the average age of a startup founder in the world today is not this person who was sold in movies. It's actually well over the age of 40 years old. Just think about what I just said to you. Because the narrative we see every day is, businesses started predominantly by these young people in their 20s, and that is true. But the average age is above 40. That should liberate those of us in the room who are older. I'm quarter to 40 myself, so, I'm 39. I turned 40 years old in 3 months' time, but I know I'm Zulu and good-looking, so I look like 22. So that's the first thing I wanted to share with you. Now this is important, and this is for yourselves. We looked at the amount of capital and funding that goes into different markets. Then we looked at the amount of capital and funding in the startup space that goes into Uganda specifically. And we did this over a 3-year period. And what do you notice? You notice what we call the bell curve upside down. So I'll distribute it to you the following way. This is funding in thousands of US dollars. And you notice that there's more funding going into startups, even here in Uganda, between 2020 and 2022. Some of you here will know what I'm talking about. You know somebody who's participated in a USAID or UNAID, when they were here program, or UKAID program, or you know somebody who's received some grant funding or has raised some angel investment, for instance. You know somebody like this who's participated in a Techstars or something like this. They've actually raised some funding. Some of you here also know somebody who's received some funding from a sort of a CSR function of a bank or an insurance company that's operating in the country. For me, what I find interesting is not necessarily this graph, which is that there is more money going into the ecosystem, but this you should find interesting, that the money is going towards fewer businesses. It's interesting because it tells us two things. First, the ecosystem is maturing. And second, the risk appetite of the investors is changing. It means that investors are looking for businesses that are better developed, with more traction, and a proven business case. Some of us have been around this business for long enough to have seen times when you could raise money with a PowerPoint presentation and some decent English. Those days are over. Investors today are asking for more. And the question becomes, if the investors are asking for more, how do we show up and how do we deliver more? So I want to challenge everybody in this room to dream bigger and to aim for more. Now let's get back to that original thesis of ours, this Pink Panther problem. I want to tell you a little bit about the history of Pink Panther. You'll find this interesting. So Pink Panther actually comes from a movie in the 1960s, in 1963. It's credited to a man called Blake Edwards. Those of you here who are old enough remember when Pink Panther was the cartoon. The younger people might know Pink Panther as the original image that I showed. It was composed by a man called Mancini. And if you think about it, here's why we call it the Pink Panther problem. First, the tune is very recognizable. And second, the tune sounds very simple. That's the tune. When you see successful business people, the likes of which you saw here earlier, across the many panels that they were in, and you observe them from a distance, and you say, oh, he runs a beverage business, or he runs a nightclub, or she's in media, or she's a journalist. Oh, that's easy, I can do that. What you're doing is you're committing the sin of the Pink Panther problem. you hear the tune, and you understand the tonality, and you begin to think, because it looks easy from the outside, it must be easy when you do it. So let's imagine all of us here in this room wanted to perform the article of Pink Panther. What would that look like? Well, first, it wouldn't be possible for you to do it alone, unless you were maybe playing the main tune and you were using a saxophone. But if you really wanted to play the whole article, you would need an orchestra. An orchestra? An orchestra. Have a look. The actor, the composer, the player, the trumpeter. Some of you are even your own audience. You put up the post and then you comment on your own post. And then you like yourself. And then you reshare what you've liked for yourself. And then you download yourself and you WhatsApp yourself to yourself. Hear me and hear me now. If you want to build anything worth building, you can't do it alone. Impossible. Trust me, I've tried. So, my theory is this. Entrepreneurs don't build businesses. That's not what we do. Entrepreneurs build teams. Teams build businesses.